I want to welcome everyone to the Amberley Village Council meeting of July 12th, 2021. And it's nice to be saying welcome everyone in here. This is our first meeting in person since November of last year. And I really hope that this is something that doesn't get interrupted again. But, thank you everyone for being here. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak.
Here.
Peg Conway.
Here.
Ben Hunt.
Here.
Alita Kamine. Here. Tom Muthing.
Here.
Ray Warren.
Here.
Natalie Wolf.
Here.
Andrew Kakey.
Here.
Chief Wallace.
Here.
Rick Kay.
Here. And if everyone could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two things I wanted to mention. First, I mentioned this is our first meeting in person, and it's great to be in person, and consistent with the signs on the door. Our policy in Village Hall is that unvaccinated people should have masks on, and even vaccinated people, if they would like to wear masks, are more than welcome to wear masks. The other thing I wanted to mention is this is the first time and there's copies of it in the back available. Along with the Human Rights Commission, the council developed the guidelines for respectful discourse, and this is just a measure that we felt we wanted to put in place to ensure that as we conduct these meetings, both council members and visitors conduct themselves appropriately. And I stress that council members are going to comply with this also. Our first item on the agenda this evening is our minutes from our last meeting of June 14th, 2021. Those were circulated in advance. There was one comment and to those, and those were circulated again. Are there any further comments? Seeing none, we consider the minutes approved. Next item on our agenda is the finance report for May of 2021, which is normally presented by our village manager. He is away on vacation, and as the chair of the finance committee, I will present the finance report. Earnings tax collections for June, which included the tax return date, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind, were $690,000, bringing year-to-date collections to $1.8 million, or 60% of our budget of $3 million. So we are off to a very good start to the year, and as the chair of the finance committee, I'm pretty confident that we will achieve that budget. So that's great news for the village. Total revenues, so that includes the revenues of the earnings tax collection and property tax, et cetera, were 59% of budget, and expenditures were 41% of budget, which to me is, again, a great indication that the staff of the village are continuing to very much watch expenses very closely. We do always have a lot of our expenses back-ended to the year, but again, I think we're off to a great year on both the revenues and expenses, which meant that the unencumbered fund balance for the general fund at the end of May was $6 million, which again is a great place for the village to be, and it was also one of the factors that very much allowed the Streets Committee, Council, and the Finance Committee to authorize the streets program, because we are in a very good place as a village. And that concludes my finance report. Are there any questions? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is going to be some swearing in of some new auxiliary officers. And these officers are very critical to the village as we ensure to keep all of our residents safe. So I thank those people for coming forward and in doing this?
Tonight, we're going to be swearing in 2 new auxiliary officers with our department. As we said, the auxiliaries play a key role into assisting us with additional patrols, as well as covering off-duty details, and really it helps us increase on visibility. They perform the same function as a regular police officer does on the daily, day-to-day functions. Our first officer that will be sworn in first is Alexander Wayne Price. Alex is a recent graduate of Claremont College Police Academy. Alex is following in his footsteps of Lieutenant Wayne Price from the State Highway Patrol. Lieutenant Price is highly respected in the county, and I know Alex will continue to follow in those steps. Alex spent the last couple of months actually riding with our department while he was in the academy, just to see what kind of law enforcement he wanted to go into, whether he wanted to go into a local jurisdiction, state patrol, or what direction he wanted to go. And Alex actually fit in really well, and at this point, Alex will be sworn in as a new officer here with Amberley. Today with Alex is his parents, Wayne and Patty Price, and his girlfriend, Erica Toms. I know I'd say it wrong. Okay, Alex, if you can come forward.
Please raise your right hand. Yes, please. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America. The Constitution and laws of the State of Ohio. And the laws and ordinances of the Village of Amberley Village, Ohio. And to the best of my ability, will discharge the duties of police officer for Amberley Village.
I will discharge the duties of police officer for the rest of my life.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Our next officer is going to be Officer Jamie Denise Bird. Jamie attended Great Oaks Police Academy in 2008. She started her police career in the city of Mount Healthy, where she served from 2009 to 2013. Jamie then took a position with the Springfield Township Police Department, where she served in many different capacities there. Most recently as the school resource officer, and she developed and introduced new programs to the schools. In 2015, Jamie received her master's in public administration. Jamie now took a new position outside of police work, but has the desire to continue to serve, and that's why she's coming to Amberley to serve as an auxiliary officer with us. Today with Jamie is a host of officers, Deshaun Brooks and his daughter Jasmine Brooks, Eric Kidd, Kevin Taylor, and Brandy Gayhart. Jamie, if you want to come forward.
Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Jane Bird,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States of America,
the Constitution Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll now move on to citizens to address council. And first, Natalie Fields from our Deer Park Library branch manager, who has addressed council, I think now 3 or 4 times. And there are very exciting things happening at the Deer Park branch. And I know you try to come to us once a year, at least once a year, to give us updates. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you. Council has all of the slides that I'm going to show. There are also some handouts back there if anybody wants to take them home this evening. So we had a community information session back in February. And so any of you who have watched that hour-long Zoom meeting, this is not a whole lot different than that, but it's not an hour. So I just want to start out with that this was part of his facilities master plan. You folks approved an increase in our levy back in 2018. In 2019, we held meetings in all of the communities where we have libraries. We had 14 focus groups, and we did tons of surveys to ask you how you wanted us to spend your tax dollars. And so this word cloud here captures that feedback, that you really wanted dynamic social spaces for community-focused opportunities, that kids, teens, and adults would all have something exciting and engaging to do there, that we make our buildings accessible, and that we have flexible spaces that can meet competing needs simultaneously. That's something that our current branch, our facility, just can't accommodate very well. So we had more folks come out to the listening session at Deer Park than any place else in the county, and that made a huge impression on our library leadership and our library board, that we knew that we would be opening some next generation libraries that are going to be a little different than what you've seen so far, and that the Deer Park and surrounding communities was so supportive of our tiny branch, means that we're going to get to expand like this. I also want to emphasize that it's through your community advocacy that the Dillonvale Shopping Center, our landlords, have substantially incentivized our ability to be there. And that is a key part of why we were able to do this type of expansion, that there's no way we could have afforded that at a market rate rent. So I also want to let you know that we're very happy that we have a 10-year lease at just a very competitive rate, and we have an option to renew for 10 more years with only a slight increase. So this is a great long-term investment. We're dedicated to serving our local community, and we're also counting on this new facility being a hub for the region. So this lets you see a little bit of what the new space is going to look like. You'll see designated areas for kids, teens, and adults. There'll be a large open area for conversation, meeting with your neighbors, engaging, and we can offer some pretty big events at this location. The community room in the front that's in purple, that will be for library use, of course, but that's also a space that community members can reserve. That'll seat about 100 people, auditorium fashion. The messy meeting room, that is another space. We're going to use that definitely for our youth programs. That space can be divided. So again, community members could use it as a larger meeting room that seats about 70, or as smaller meeting rooms. The green spaces that you see there are 7 of them total. Those are study spaces. Throughout the county, folks said again and again, we really need places where people can be together and work, whether that's homework, working on their business, conducting community meetings, and those are all spaces that the community can reserve and use. They each seat about 4 people, and all of these spaces have technology like you're seeing here. We have PA systems in the larger rooms, and even the smaller rooms have monitors and hookups for your laptops. We also have a quiet room. So this is a really key area, that our library is a very dynamic, engaging space, and if you've been in there, especially after school, it's really loud. It's just really hard to do a good job for any group of 25 or 30 people and have it be silent, but definitely not for young people who are choosing to come to the library after they have spent 8 hours in school. So we have a quiet space, and it's for anyone of any age who wants to sit down and shut up, and be quiet and do their thing. So we're really excited to offer that as well. This is a artist rendering of what the marketplace will look like. There will definitely be seating and places to be. All of this is mobile. So we could bring authors to that large community room, but we could also bring large presenters here. And all of that furniture can be arranged as seating, and we can have big, fun events in this space. It's very flexible. And you can see back in the corner all those windows. Those are looking into our messy meeting room, our program room. So I have a few pictures of the construction. The walls are starting to go up. The electricity is starting to go in. It's feeling very real. That is a look into the community room. So this will be a good before, and after is going to be especially delightful. So our children's area, we will have technology components, so there will be computers, PCs for folks to use in the kids area, in the teen area, and in the adult area. We have had 5 at our current space. We'll have 18 PCs in the new space, and we will also have a laptop kiosk. I'm not sure we'll have that when we open. I don't know if y'all know that there's a worldwide shortage of computer chips, and it's really hard to get hands on a computer, especially a laptop. But we'll have a laptop lending kiosk for use in the building, and we'll have 12 laptops that folks can check out and use in any of those spaces. This is the front for our teen space. You'll see some large work tables for groups to work collaboratively together. 4 of our 7 study pods are sort of on the youth side. Again, anyone of any age can use them, but we did try to space them out within the library. That's what it looks like now. The little inset picture on the left, do you see how the ceiling looks kind of fuzzy and foamy? That is the sound dampening cover that's going to go on the entire ceiling. It's an exposed ceiling. I've been talking to the architects from the first moment, how can we have loud and quiet in the same building? And they tell me that this is how we do it. So this is what the outside is going to look like. We're adding in some green spaces. We're adding crosswalks, adding additional handicap parking points. It's really going to be a draw to the area. There you can see a little bit how we've tried to work with this safety. Lots of folks have asked us, are we going to have a stop sign? That just wasn't in the cards. It's not permitted in the lease. But we were able to bring the sidewalk out farther, so no longer will cars just be driving right in front of the sidewalk where folks are stepping into traffic, that there's going to be a buffer where drivers can see. And again, we'll have 3 nice crosswalks there. So the QR code here, if you have a smartphone, if you have a tablet, you can scan that and it will show you a 3D rendering of the new space. So you can hold it up in front of you and you can turn around 360 degrees. You can look up and down and see what the place is going to look like from the marketplace. And my contact info is up there. I am glad to field your questions at any time, in person, email, phone. I love to talk to you folks, and I can talk all night about the library, but I won't. So further updates will be available at that website. And I like to stick around when I come here. I'm not able to make it here a lot, but I like to hear what's going on with all of you, and so I'll be here until after the meeting, if anybody has questions and want to talk. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions now from councilmen? If not, but thank you very much for coming back so often, and we really appreciate the updates and are very excited about your new space.
Thank you. Thank all of you for your support. It's my pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to take you all on a tour this fall.
Next, Wendy Van Buren from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, who is instrumental in running the Tree City USA program for the area down here in Southwest, and in fact, extending well up into Ohio, is here to present Amberley with its award for 2020.
Yes.
So I invite the members of the Environmental Stewardship Committee that are here to come forward to receive the award. Just kind of right here, same place. Perfect. Go ahead.
Well, it is my honor and my pleasure to award Amberley Village your 17th Tree City USA Award. You've been a Tree City since 2004, and we're one of the first communities I worked with when I started my job, and it's been a pleasure ever since. So I'm really glad to be here. This is also my first in-person council meeting since it happened. So I'm really kind of giddy to be here and be a part of this. We were unfortunately unable to have our traditional Tree City USA Awards banquet, which we've actually had here in Amberley. You've hosted before. It was supposed to be in Montgomery, and they were so sad they couldn't have everyone come. They actually made a care package of lovely tchotchkes, coasters and mugs and all sorts of things lovely here for you to distribute. And I wanted to thank you so very much for all of your hard work. Trees really make Amberley better, right? And we all know this from just looking around Amberley. People are outside, they're enjoying the shade, they spend lots of time outside. And there's lots of really great benefits to having trees, from people being healthier and calmer, to people drive slower along roads with trees, to, at hospitals, people get better quicker, kids learn better, all sorts of really great reasons. And so I wanted to recognize that you are one of 245 communities across the state, so the work you do here is really special. And there's only 3,538 across the entire country. So it's a really important thing. It's more than just a sign at the beginning of the village or the flag out front. So I appreciate all of your hard work. I hope we do it for many years to come. And thank you very, very much. I'll leave these.
And Wendy, the one thing I wanted to say is, obviously 2020 was a very difficult year for everyone, but we really appreciate your guidance throughout the period, helping us through the period to maintain that Tree City USA. Your guidance was instrumental, so thank you very much.
You kept your program going, you kept on meeting, you celebrated trees, made it a priority. You did all the hard work. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Nancy Moran.
My name's Nancy Moran. I live at 8480 Arborcrest Drive. My husband and I have lived in Amberley for 34 years and have loved living in Amberley and consider it a blessing to live and be a part of this village and community. And today I just want to have a final say, I hope, with my concerns with Amberley Green and the unleashed dog issue, which I appreciate council addressing. I've shared this before, but I'll briefly say that I had an unfortunate incident at Amberley Green with my dog when our small dog was attacked by a dog at Amberley Green. And in the course of this, my husband and I both fell, and my dog was uninjured. Her harness was pulled off, but I broke my leg there and had to be removed from the green. So since that time, when my leg healed, we went back to walking. We would walk Monday through Friday there. We would not go on the weekends. Never a time were we not approached by an unleashed dog. Many times they seemed friendly, other times not so. To the point that we quit going. My husband would occasionally go, but I wasn't looking for conflict, and I wasn't looking for conflict with the dog or for the unleashed dog owners there either. So I don't go to the green anymore and would like to go back. I did participate in 2 meetings of the Building and Parks Committee and spoke there. And in that course of those meetings, what I learned was 2 things: that I'm not alone in having had unfortunate experiences at the green, and number 2, that there's been quite an issue with Burning Tree, unsolicited, unleashed dogs on their property there. As a citizen here, I want to say that I'm not in support of having gates put up, fences put up, areas of the green separated to be made into a dog park. I believe that a leash requirement is what would remedy the situation, and that's, I believe, consistent with what the state, the county, and the city of Cincinnati, for one, requires. And I know we're not a park. I know it's a green, but it sure acts as though it's a park. Secondly, I wouldn't support having police resources there to monitor the cars there, whether they have stickers or not, or unleashed dogs there. I appreciate our police department very much, and for appropriate use of their resources. So I would say the ordinance, I know, is a compromise, and I understand that. And I would say it would remedy my own personal issues. I would simply go for the hours allotted that were for leash dogs. But I don't believe that that would be a remedy for the dogs on Burning Tree. I hope that it would be, and maybe it will be. And maybe also by restricting the hours, it would filter out some of the less responsible off-leash dog owners. Because I have witnessed very responsible off-leash dog owners there. And so finally, I would say the green is for the citizens of Amberley Village first. It's for any child that wants to go there, and I wouldn't recommend a child go there now with off-leash dogs, or any elderly person that wants to take a nice walk in a shaded area. It's just really a lovely area. So again, I'm pro-leash. The ordinance I appreciate as a compromise, and I thank you for the time you've given me today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We'll now move on to committee reports, and the first committee is the Public Buildings and Parks Committee.
Okay, thank you. The committee has not met since our last council meeting, and tonight we are presenting for a 3rd reading Ordinance 2021-8, establishing leash regulations for Amberley Green. Just to recap a bit what the ordinance includes, it requires dogs to be leashed in the parking lot at all times. It designates the hours of dawn to 9 a.m. and 3 to 5 p.m. as the hours that dogs may be off leash, and specifies the dogs must be under control when off leash. And it further defines what under control means: that the dog is visible to the owner or caretaker, comes to their side when called, stays by their side when instructed to, obeys commands not to chase other animals, and refrains from jumping on or contacting people. The ordinance also limits the number of dogs that someone can bring to the green to 3, and with the requirement that only 2 may be off leash at any one time. It requires dog owners to remove the dog feces and waste, It allows for the ejection of dogs and their owners from the green if they fail to comply with these rules. And significantly, it calls for visible signage, which has come up quite a lot, to welcome visitors and delineate the rules. And finally, it stipulates that the committee will annually review these regulations. Before we get into any nitty-gritty around the regulations themselves, I want to address the liability language in the ordinance. In previous meetings, we identified a need to clarify that the dog owner or caretaker is always liable as required under Ohio law. And at this point, I want to offer an amendment around that. Our council packet contained new draft text for Section H, which addresses liability. I'm actually going to offer an amendment that modifies the draft language to shorten it a bit, and which has been cleared with our law director. So at this time, I want to move that Section H of Ordinance 2021-8 be amended to state, in accordance with Ohio law, any owner or caretaker will be liable for any injury, death, or loss of property caused by a dog's actions. Period. End it there. So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we amend ordinance 2021-8 on section H, the liability language, to read instead, in accordance with Ohio law, any owner or caretaker will be liable for any injury, death, or loss of property caused by a dog's actions. Are there any questions or comments? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we amend ordinance 2021-8, section H, to as I stated. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak. Peg Conway.
Yes.
Ben Hunt.
Yes.
Alita Kamine. Yes. Tom Muething.
Yes.
Ray Warren.
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I want to continue a little bit now onto the regulations and offer my final thoughts on this. In my 13 years on Village Council, I can say that this matter has elicited the most passionate input from citizens, including a large number from outside of Amberley, and presents the most challenging policy decision that I have faced. I empathize with all the different points of view that have been expressed, including those of our police department. Over the past weeks, I've tried to step back and think about what's at stake from a broader perspective in the role of an elected official. What I keep coming to is the disconnect between the property's actual status as undeveloped land available for limited recreation and the widespread perception of it as a dog park. Though I was not on council in 2012 when Amberley Green was open to the public, I was present for some of those discussions. And I think the expectation at the time was that folks from nearby neighborhoods like Pleasant Ridge or Silverton would join our residents to come and walk at Amberley Green with or without dogs. The present situation with the property a destination for dog lovers from Amberley and all over the area was not envisioned. It's an unintended consequence that pleases many people and frustrates or distresses many others. This is the crux of the issue as I have come to understand it, and I feel it's our responsibility to address it. Painful as it might be, I believe that a hard reset is needed at Amberley Green to fully align public perception with the property's reality. Such a reset is required in the immediate term to address public safety issues that we know exist there and to welcome all residents to enjoy the property regardless of dog preference. In particular, I believe it needs to occur before any consideration of creating dog zones or enclosed areas of any kind. So I move to amend Ordinance 2021-8, establishing leash regulations at Amberley Green so that off-leash hours would be limited to the morning from dawn to 9 a.m. So moved.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we would amend ordinance 2021-8. And what that amendment would do is in section 1, letter B, it currently states designate from dawn to 9 a.m. and 3 to 5. What that amendment would effectively do is remove the language and 3 to 5. So it would now state designate from dawn to 9 a.m. to allow dogs off leash. So it has been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Vice Mayor.
Just to say that I think that that is far too limiting. I think that it excludes anyone who can't make it in the morning and doesn't give them another opportunity during the day. 3 to 5. I also think 3 to 5 is too limiting, but I am willing to compromise. And you know, I was not planning to come and make a fuss that that hours should be until dusk. But I do think that limiting the hours to only dawn to 9 a.m. is too limiting.
Councilman Bardock?
I agree with Councilmember Wolf. The property's not used, it's used for walkers. I believe at a minimum it should be 3 to 5, and I actually believe it should more likely be 4 to 7 p.m., which is when people are off work and actually use the property. I don't think it's fair to residents who've paid for the property to use it for 2 hours during hours when most people are at work, at least the working population is. And I have some other comments. I believe if we don't have more people using the green, walking on it, we'll have more crime there. Recently, I called in an abandoned car that was there for 2 days. I believe it was involved in criminal activity, and I believe that's what was found out to be. On July 5th, another dog walker found numerous shell casings on the property and turned them into the police. I'm assuming that was someone was shooting off guns instead of fireworks on July 4th. Walkers provide collective safety for surrounding streets. Undoubtedly, drugs are sold at French Park. I witnessed that when I was walking there regularly. If we don't have people walking that property regularly, we're going to see it on the green. That's my belief. The police don't have time to sit there all day long. They have more important work to do. Police priorities should be on crime prevention, speed enforcement, and protecting the synagogues in the village. Leashing the dogs approaching the parking lot and garden do make sense. I agree with that. As I said previously, based on my personal experience, leashing dogs will not prevent issues. I think it will only increase issues. Some dogs will be more aggressive when approached by other dogs, and people won't be able to hold their dogs back, and we'll have more people falling, but we'll see what happens. I strongly disagree that limiting the property to 2 hours a day is ridiculously unreasonable, given the fact that absolutely nothing is happening on the property right now. I do agree it could be revisited 6 months or annually or every 3 months, but I think limiting it to 2 hours a day is absolutely ludicrous. So I think it should at minimum be 3 to 5 in addition to dawn to 9 a.m.
Councilwoman Kamine?
I'm sort of listening to everybody's discussion today. I mean, I think I supported that because I have a lot of comments which I'll save, but I mean, one other consideration if you're concerned about the number of hours is, you know, the other version of that could be more hours in the morning. Keep in mind there are 2 days a week that are weekends, so that also, you know, for working people, you could go until 10 or 11 instead of just until 9, and it would accomplish sort of that morning. There's no magic to the number 9. In other words, in my second, I just want to be clear that morning hours is, I don't feel there's a magic to the 9 o'clock number. So I'm not necessarily proposing anything specific there. I've seconded the motion on the table, but if that was the difference between what my colleagues are talking about, that, you know, if they felt that 3 to 5 could move to 9 to 11, that seems like it could be on the table. So I know it's not in the, this is reopening the entire can of worms, so.
Yeah, currently we have a motion on the table that.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this, and I know that the Parks Committee, before my time joining it, spent a lot of time vetting a lot of different opinions and proposals. To me, I just think that we need to get a compromise, and I think that we need to get the job done. And so to me, I think that the current proposal, I'm not sure if I would support the motion to reduce the hours to just morning hours. I think that the afternoon hours seem reasonable.
Sorry, very quick comment. I just want to quickly respond to Councilmember Bardock. I think the challenge is the assumption. I mean, I think many folks, including the comments from our speaker today, utilization of the property is not only by people who are walking their dogs off leash. If there were opportunities for people who will only go there if dogs are leashed, to have some time that they know they can be safe, that will also increase utilization. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. I think that I agree actually with Councilmember Hunt. I'm here to get this across the finish line, to get some compromise, and to hope for the best here, even though I do support some, I think, stronger restrictions than many folks. But it's time to bring people who feel like they have been driven away from this property back. That's the point. I want people to come and take care of the property and utilize it for safety purposes, exactly the same reason that you do. But people I know won't go there anymore for that reason. So it's time. I just wanted to clarify that.
I thought I would save these comments for later, but given the discussion going on up here, I thought I'd share my thoughts now. First, I want to thank Ms. Conway for leading this effort for 2 years. This is, I don't know if I call it a labor of love, but I certainly thank you for all your efforts and keeping the eye on the prize and being respectful of everyone who came to our committee meetings, and keeping us kind of on track. As you shared, so I have a little narrative here that is going to touch on what's on the proposal here, and also something else that I think we also need to consider may fall outside the bounds of this current ordinance, though. As Ms. Conway shared, the green was purchased about 13 years ago to prevent what was seen at that time as undesirable development. Council decided that until we had some plan with community input, it would remain as is with minimal upkeep and to benefit all the residents. The only development that occurred was to create a community garden. Other than what happened and interfered other than what happened was as Ms. Conway shared, was the law of unintended consequences. What started as a property for everyone has evolved into a 150-acre open dog park. Fewer families take advantage of the grounds. Non-dog lovers don't take advantage of the grounds. Dog lovers who don't want to be accosted by other dogs don't use the grounds. Residents along Burning Tree can't take full advantage of their privacy without being harassed by dogs. Dogs are unleashed from the moment they leave their car till they return to their car. Compounding this is that the word is out in our region that Amberley Green is unofficially open as a virtual dog park. Just need to bring some water. Personally, so-called friendly dogs don't bother me. I don't mind being approached by an unleashed dog and having my hands and face licked. I don't. But not everyone appreciates this friendliness, and many feel threatened. Even dog owners have complained to us about unleashed dog behaviors we just heard earlier. I think it's important to note that virtually all parks in the surrounding areas, in the state and national parks, require the dogs to be leashed. There are some official dog parks in the area that could accommodate unleashed dogs, but we've heard they're too small and don't have as much privacy as Amberley Green. Perfect has become the enemy of good. There's a lot of passion on this issue. Over the course of 2 years, as I've shared, Ms. Conway's committee has heard from many people about safety hazards from unleashed dogs and simply the right to privacy. We've also heard from people who love bringing their dogs to freely roam on Amberley Green. We've also heard from the police chief that barring any surprises, we can't expect police presence on the green. Is it possible to accommodate everyone, right? That's the question before us. Can we accomplish the desires of those who want permission of unleashed dogs and those who don't? Can we be respectful of both groups? Can Amberley Green, a property of about 150 acres, accommodate both groups and at minimal cost to the village? It's a huge piece of property. I'd like to propose, and again, this is not, there's an ordinance on the table here, but I'd like us to think about setting aside maybe 10 acres of the green, meadowland, to be used by unleashed dogs and adequately isolated so that pedestrians, dog owners that leash their dogs, and residents have their privacy. This can be accomplished with natural barriers such as tall grass that's at least 10 to 20 feet in depth. This area can be available during all daylight hours. Amberley Green does have these kinds of open spaces. I've been on the green most recently with Wes Brown. In fact, I'll just share something that was printed out that Wes and maintenance put together that isolated, different areas of the green that could be considered, dog spaces if we want. Now, these areas, these spaces are quite large. I'm not proposing a space of 25 acres that's kind of shown in here. It could be half that size. And I'll just pass this here, and we can pass it around. And now, mind you, some of these spaces, it may not be perfect. Spaces may not be adjacent to the parking lot. It would require that all dogs be leashed until reaching a designated area. There'll be no water available, such as exists now. We can expect that those who use the unleashed area will need to self-regulate, ensure that dog poop is collected, for example. But it's in their interest to self-regulate. A natural barrier 10 to 20 feet thick virtually ensures that dogs don't escape the area. This may not be perfect, but likely good enough. If this needs to be fine-tuned, this council can always do so. The scenario is almost a win-win. So why do I say almost a win-win? To be clear, if we legally create a dog zone or designated dog times, we will enter into another area of law of unintended consequences. Right now, we have an unofficial dog park. If we create a legal dog park, we can assume that this will formally be advertised on Cincinnati.com, Yelp, and other venues, and we will see an increase in visitors from all over seeking to use the green, whether all 150 acres or a designated area. Let's not fool ourselves. That's what will happen. Recently, I've been walking on the green and reviewing regulations of other local municipalities. The one that comes closest to our situation is Marymount. Marymount has one park that under certain conditions can be used for unleashed dogs. If the ball field is being used, for example, soccer or football or baseball, dogs cannot roam unleashed. They have to be leashed. Because of the vagaries of team sports scheduling, I assume few residents from outside Marymount take advantage of the unleashed dog allowance. You're not going to drive some miles only to learn that your dog has to be leashed. The property is essentially used by Marymount residents. The only thing that comes close to Marymount is if we restrict unleashed dogs to the morning hours, which is what is on the proposal now. Afternoon, evening hours will bring everyone. It's the law of unintended consequences. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to make a couple comments too. And I think, one could say, why does it take 2 years? And I really do give Councilwoman Conway credit, because the easy thing to do in this case might have been just to simply say what other parks in the county and in the city, et cetera, do, unleash. But this was really an attempt to try to create a situation that is a good, not a best, but a good situation for both dog owners who want to have their dogs off leash, dog owners who want their dogs on leash and other dogs on leash, and people who want to enjoy the green to walk or run or other things. So I think it has been, great that the time has been spent. We've received a lot of comments, and I think, there's been a lot of consideration given. But I also think it is time to move on and come up with a proposal that tries to do that as the best we can, and then commit ourselves to review this thing on a regular basis. And I've in fact talked to a number of the people who have made comments, and possibly putting together a users group of the park that we could use to get not only feedback into council, but to give feedback back out, to say, here's things that we're hearing, and things, because again, as I've said a number of times, the real goal is to change behavior. And we want this to be something that dogs can enjoy. Dogs should be able to run, etc. But we need to change behavior. And, I don't think ideas of letting plants grow, because we really cannot do that down there. We have an issue that we have to address with invasive plants like poison hemlock that is growing wild down there. And we are, in fact, later this month, the village manager and myself are going to be touring the property to see what we can do about those kind of things. So I'm supportive of doing anything that allows this to move on. I have said many times that the main thing for dog owners to do is be courteous to others. And part of that being courteous to others is if you have your dog off leash during on-leash hours, during off-leash hours, and you see someone else, that you should put your dog on the leash. It's as simple as that. And I'll leave it at that.
Can I ask a question? I have a question for Chief Wallace. Sorry. There's two options on the table, as I see it. Off-leash dogs, daily, sunrise until 9 a.m. Off-leash dogs, permitted sunrise to 9 a.m. daily, and 3 to 5 p.m. daily, or a date to be determined. What are your thoughts?
Easier for us, like I said again. Obviously, we're going to enforce however you guys pass it, but obviously, if we have set times, it makes it easier for us to know. The off-leash being 3 to 5 is going to generate a lot more runs for us, a lot more call volume, because when the dogs are off the leash, that's the busiest time we have in the police department because traffic flows are heavier. My recommendation was the morning hours and late in the evening hours for off-leash. The 3 to 5, if you look at our daily call log, when we have the trouble with dogs running loose, we're still going to have issues with dogs that are off leash and people that have their dogs on leash. We're still going to have the dogs jumping on people and everything else when the dogs are off leash. It's not going to go away. We're still going to have it, but it's easier for us if we have set times. Obviously, that time changes with the, with daylight savings and everything else.
All right, thank you.
To add, that is why I am moving the amendment to make it only the morning. We heard from, after we brought this ordinance out of committee, we heard that feedback from Chief Wallace. We heard a lot of concerns from people who said, well, it's 5:30 and somebody still got their dog off leash. What am I going to do? The notion of people enforcing things themselves up there, I think, is problematic. And I think with the time change, wanting ease of administration, that's part of the reason for my amendment. Just the PM is too difficult unless it's only part of the year. There was some discussion or suggestion about dusk. Well, dusk is a moving target. How on earth, if we can't get people now, I've never heard any practical sounding proposal in that direction. I also want to say I disagree with the mayor. I think we want more than changing behavior. I am thinking we need a recalibration to attract and serve more of the people within our closer region, our own residents, and people for whom running over quickly is an option in the late afternoon or evening. And we need to do things to not incentivize people to drive 10 miles to get here. And I think that is more than changing behavior. It is a recalibration, or hard reset. That's the word I used. So that's more the rationale behind my motion. If other people have different hours, go for it.
The only thing I'll say is you got to keep in perspective is the time of day. In the mornings, if you go up there in the morning, early in the morning, there's less people there. You go out there midday through lunchtime and stuff, up to 4 or 5 o'clock, there's a lot more people there. And then later in the evening, the last hour before the park would close, same as French Park, there's less people there. And that's the only reason that I made that recommendation, because those are the times that there's less people.
Okay, Vice Mayor, and then what I'd really like to do is try to move to a vote on the amendment.
Well, I just would like to comment on dusk, because I felt pretty strongly that the closing time for dogs off leash should be dusk. And yes, dusk is a moving target, and I see that as an advantage, because if dogs are allowed off leash, say, just for example, 5 to dusk, in the summertime, you get longer hours. You'll have more people there. In the wintertime, dusk comes sooner, 6:30. You're not going to have dogs there in the wintertime because closed to dogs in the late afternoon. I think that dusk solves an element of the situation.
The lack of definition.
But dawn is the exact same. Dawn and dusk, they both vary with the seasons. Dawn is sometimes earlier, sometimes later. That's just like, that's living in a world that goes around.
Okay. We have a motion on the table to amend the ordinance 2021-8, and the amendment, as I stated before, would amend section 1, letter B, and designate from dawn to 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and eliminate the 3 to 5 p.m. That has been moved and seconded, so I would like to call the roll.
Richard Bardock.
No.
Peg Conway.
Yes.
Ben Hunt.
No.
Alita Kamine. Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Ray Warren.
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
No.
Okay, so that amendment passes by a vote of 4 to 3. So we now have before us an ordinance that has been amended twice, once in the liability section and once in section 1 to have the hours be from dawn to 9 a.m. Are there other suggested amendments?
Yes, I will defer to the vice mayor if she would like to discuss this, but in section A, I believe she brought up last time, and maybe this is a moot point if we're limiting the hours as much, but extending, I was driving down here today, saw, all the girls playing tennis from M&D and just people going to the garden. I think the vice mayor had suggested that perhaps we think about the parking lot as a slightly broader area around the tennis courts, around the building, and perhaps all the way to the garden, those areas where people are coming to utilize the property, not for the other 120 acres, but the things that are like, people are going to the tennis courts, people are going to the bathroom, people are going to the garden. This is not a walking area, this is not a dog area. I mean, it's sort of like a different thing than everything else, and that perhaps we should consider kind of extending our definition in A to be inclusive of that. But I defer to the vice mayor. It was her suggestion and language. If you want, if you don't want to, that's okay too. I'm happy to, I don't have language specifically, but I can probably come up with something to propose there.
Well, can I respond? I understand, I know, and that was my suggestion, that there be leash zones, designated leash zones. But in the interest of compromise, when this ordinance as it was written in our packet was sent around, I was willing to forego that in order to get something done.
And again, I mean, the ordinance on the table makes it a bit moot. People are not playing tennis at 8 o'clock in the morning or, using the garden heavily, I believe, at 9 a.m. So I don't know, maybe it's a moot suggestion, but I wanted to revisit that idea because I thought that was an interesting one at the time. But I'm also willing to move forward and we can always revisit that in 6 months during our revisit as well.
Are there other suggested amendments?
What are the requirements for referendum on this issue? Just putting that out there.
Andy?
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
I would only ask for reconsideration. I think it's truly unfair to the residents to limit this to practically no hours Monday through Friday for residents that have normal 9 to 5 working hours. It completely eliminates any time Monday through Friday. I think it's unreasonable. It should be reconsidered sometime in the afternoon. I make a motion to amend it for at least 1 hour in the afternoon.
Second.
What hour?
An hour before dusk.
Okay? And the village manager has said, if in fact, we do agree on an hour before dusk, he will work with something to figure out defining that seasonally or whatever. So it has been moved and seconded that we amend the amended ordinance 2021-8 to, in section 1, letter B, it would now read, designate from dawn till 9 a.m. and 1 hour before dusk to allow dogs off leash.
I want to also just comment that, just to clarify, I think it's in there, but just to clarify that the village manager also, if we decide, let's say we have a concert on the park or a evening program or an event, the village manager has the discretion, according to one of the later sections, to put up a sign, as Ray kind of gave the example in Marymount, to say, during this event or in this area, you got to be leashed. So that will, there is discretion in that.
And in fact, there was during the pandemic last year, the Woodwind section of the Cincinnati Symphony did a concert down to celebrate community gardening, and we did put signage up for that event to require people to have dogs on leash.
So I would like to say that I think that's even better than 3 to 5. I didn't frankly like 3 to 5, but I felt that there should be an afternoon or a second opportunity. But 3 to 5 is when probably, if there are going to be kids at Amberley Green, that's when they're going to be there. It's the hottest time of the day in the summertime. It's probably the least best time if you're going to be bringing your dog to Amberley Green in the summer when it's hot.
And in winter, 5 o'clock might be dusk.
Yeah.
So.
It might be, and anyway, I think I like your amendment, Rich. Thank you.
Okay, so it has been moved and seconded, as I described. Are there any further comments before I call for a roll call vote on that?
The only comment I have is it's still not respectful toward the owners on Burning Tree. It really compromised the use of their property when you have, if they have a barbecue, whatever, in the evening, and they have dogs coming on their property. It's not really fair to them. That's my comment.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
I walk along that length all the time. There's only one potential home that could be easily accessible by dogs, and they would have to be running after a deer to get there because it's not easy to get through all that brush. So I think if it happens, it's a very rare occurrence. It's not a regular occurrence. It would be impossible.
That's not correct.
Okay.
That's not correct.
Councilwoman Kamine, did you have some?
I'll go after we vote on this. I'd like to defer and speak then after we vote on this. I'd like to revisit the A amendment after we do this, now that we're doing this. So.
Okay. All right. It has been moved and seconded that we amend the ordinance to designate from dawn to 9 a.m. and for 1 hour prior to dusk in section 1, letter B. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak. Peg Conway.
Yes.
Ben Hunt.
Yes.
Alita Kamine.
Yes.
Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Ray Warren.
No?
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, so that amendment passes. So we now sit with ordinance 2021-8 with an amended section 1, letter B, as we described, and an amended section H as we approve.
Okay, sorry. Yes. So I'd like to propose an amendment to section A, when in any parking lot around the perimeter of any, I don't know, building or structure, to include the tennis court, and around the perimeter of the community garden. I mean, or some version of that. That's not magic, but so that is part of A.
Is there a second to that?
Can I wordsmith that? Can we
Yes,
wordsmith
please,
that a little
please,
bit?
please do, please.
Sorry, how about if we just say, A, parking lots, when in the parking lot in Amberley Green, dogs are required to remain on leash by the dog's owner or caretaker, comma, and in any other designated on-leash zone. And we determine the on-leash zones by signage, period after zone. And then that was just a comment.
I was going to suggest that perhaps signage could address this issue more effectively than a lot of ordinance language.
I don't think we would want to, like, it would be too difficult, don't you think, like to say, like, the 100 feet on the hill next to the community garden. Would you agree that maybe putting a sign at the bottom?
That's fine.
Saying this is a dog leash zone, and then if you're going the other direction, the sign would say this is a dog leash zone, like a school zone.
So
sign.
I'm fine with that. Is the signage section is like, what is the administrative plan for the signage section? Is it to go back to?
As soon as we get this passed.
Yeah, no, I know.
When we know what we're doing, to put it together. And the purpose of the signage, as stated in the ordinance, is to welcome visitors and delineate the rules. So
That's
I think
perfectly fine.
that.
As long as that's like, I think that is fair to our community garden folks and to the people using that space that now in those dusk hours, that could be heavy traffic for that little section over there. It just makes sense to kind of, and it's kind of in the burning tree vicinity. It's kind of covers a lot of our bases over just that little pocket in the corner could be, we'll propose that as a zone for your administrative consideration after we get through the legislative component of this. That's fine. I will withdraw my motion.
Okay. Are there any other amendments? We're gonna
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
we're gonna
you're right.
address it
Amend.
with signage.
No, Natalie's correct. So language to amend A to at the end of the current A and any other designated like leash zone or on-leash zone or something like
Okay.
that.
So the suggested motion is that section 1, letter A would read, when in any parking lot at Amberley Green and any designated unleashed areas as indicated by signage, dogs are required to be physically restrained on a leash by the dog's owner or caretaker at all times.
Perfect. Great.
So that's the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we amend section 1, letter A, to read, when in any parking lot at Amberley Green or any designated areas as indicated by signage, dogs are required to be physically restrained on a leash by the dog's owner or caretaker at all times. Is there any discussion to that? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we amend section 1, letter A, as I described. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak. Peg Conway.
Yes.
Ben Hunt.
Yes.
Alita Kamine. Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Ray Warren.
Yes.
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay, any other suggested amendments? Okay, so before us now is ordinance 2021-8 with 3 amendments. And this is the third reading. So this is a council decision, but I'll give you my opinion. You know, we said at the last meeting if there were significant amendments that we might consider an additional reading. I personally am of the opinion that these are not significant amendments. So it would be appropriate to have a motion to approve the amended ordinance as it sits?
I move that we adopt ordinance 2021-8, ordinance establishing leash regulations for Amberley as amended.
Seconded.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2021-8 as amended. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the amended ordinance 2021-8. Is there any further discussion? If not, it has been moved and seconded that we approve the ordinance 2021-8 as amended. Please call the roll.
Richard Bardak. Peg Conway.
Yes.
Ben Hunt.
Yes.
Alita Kamine. Tom Muthing.
Yes.
Ray Warren.
No.
Natalie Wolf.
Yes.
Okay. So note that the ordinance is approved. And I know Councilwoman Conway will take this action. I mean, there's the action of signage, and I really do think that the need to set up communication that is much better so that we have the users that are using this park on a very often basis. They are the ones that can give us very valuable feedback, and we can use them to provide the feedback to the people, because that is the best way to get the word out to people, is use the people, whether we call those ambassadors, super users, I don't care what they're called, but those are the people that we can best use to really get the word out of whether it's changing behavior or drastically changing whatever, I don't care where you end up. And the Public Buildings and Parks Committee will take that up. Thank you. And I assume that concludes your...
That concludes my report, yes.
We'll now move on to the Law Committee.
This is the first reading of ordinance 2021-9, amending section 154.66 of the Amberley Village Code. The village maintains a zoning and property maintenance code to promote the health, safety, and welfare of residents and the community, as well as to protect and preserve property values and the quality of the life in the village. To that end, the village makes every effort to be consistent and clear in its expectations of properties in the village. While developing the Amberley Green District, zoning text questions are raised as to the process for approving temporary events such as the one-stop recycle event, farmers markets, and food truck rallies. Staff stated that Code Section 154.66 calls for all temporary events not mentioned as permitted in all districts to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The proposed amendments to Code Section 154.66 were submitted to the Planning Commission at their regular meeting on May 3rd. The amendments submitted to the Planning Commission proposed to allow temporary events of less than 7 days to be approved by the village manager, while temporary events of more than 7 days still be required to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It was discussed during the May 3rd meeting that there may be cases where the village manager may recommend an event be heard by the BZA, even though it is for less than 7 days. It was also discussed that any structures used for a temporary event would be required to meet the code requirements in section 154.12. Accessory structure and religious structures such as sukkahs would be excluded from these permit requirements. The PC recommended rewording the proposed language to clarify the intent of the amendment, which would allow the BZA to permit temporary events of up to 12 months and the village manager to permit events of up to 7 days. This language would clarify that events of 7 days or less in duration may be heard by the BZA. That concludes my report.
Okay, so that's the first reading of that particular ordinance, and as Councilman Bardak pointed out, this is something that the council reviewed, passed it to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission passed it back. So I think, as far as I'm concerned, this might be one that we should be in a position to consider at the next meeting, at the second reading. And then, related, I was remiss in one thing on ordinance 2021-8. I should have pointed out that in accordance with law, that ordinance was approved this evening, but it will not go into effect until 45 days after our approval. Okay, we'll now move on to the Land Development Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The Land Development Committee met on June 21st, and I am the new chair of the Land Development Committee and wanted to get just an update on various parcels of land in the village. And even though we don't have any action that we're taking tonight, I thought that our residents would be also interested in this as well. So just some highlights. Village Manager Scott Larmer led the presentation. We started with the north site. Residents may see Lewis Animal Hospital getting underway from the ground up over on the north site. The Lewis Animal Hospital is an 8,000 square foot facility. It's on 2 acres, and the payroll is expected to be approximately $800,000, and it should be completed by late fall of 2021. And it would be very nice to take our pets somewhere close in Amberley. There are 2 remaining undeveloped parcels on the north site. One is 2.2 acres, and the other is 5.5 acres. So along with Mercy, that is the entire north site. Moving down the road to the JCC, business is rebounding at the J. The Jewish Family Service, though, was currently housed at the J, outgrew their space, and though they wanted to stay in Amberley Village, they were unable to secure other office space within Amberley. So they moved as the space was too small to accommodate their services, but the Federation is moving into their former offices. Amberley Green, the zoning for the Amberley Green zone is complete. The JCC's plans were put on hold during the pandemic, as were the Scottish Rites plans put on hold, but developers continue to make inquiries into the Amberley Green property. 2100 Section Road, formerly known as Gibson Greeting Cards property. It's been on the market now for 3 years. It seems like longer ago than that we all got a chance to drive the wrecking ball into the old building, but it has actually only been 3 years. Recent inquiries have not met the criteria that we want for the property, but Amberley and the Port are very focused on this property and job generation for this particular site. We still believe that advanced manufacturing is realistic for this site, and all of the parties involved are still feeling optimistic about those plans, the current plans. The property is being marketed nationally and also locally. And then we also discussed current businesses that are already in Amberley, and it was a very positive meeting. So that concludes my land development report.
Are there any questions for the Vice Mayor? If not, we will now move on to the Health, Education, and Welfare Committee.
Thank you. As with the Land Development Committee, we don't have any action before us today. However, Health, Education, and Welfare is discussing something that is very interesting, and I think our residents would also be interested in it as well. We met on May 19th, and on the agenda was a resolution and a draft resolution proposed by the Human Rights Commission, which would establish Indigenous Peoples Day in Amberley Village, and also a statement acknowledging the original residents of the land upon which Amberley Village now sits, that being the indigenous tribes of the Shawnee and Miami nations. The Human Rights Commission gave a brief presentation explaining why it is important to acknowledge the people who lived on this land before us. Under the ordinance establishing the Human Rights Commission, the commission is tasked with protecting human rights, creating engaging activities that celebrate Amberley's acknowledgement of people within marginalized groups, and that bringing attention to Amberley Council to Native Americans and First Nations is within their mission. Matthew Krause, who was representing the Human Rights Commission, explained to us that acknowledgement of the land and those that lived here before us is appropriate restorative justice, since historically Native Americans have been erased from our history. Land acknowledgements are advocated by Indigenous peoples themselves, and the land we are now on was cared for by a variety of Indigenous peoples, and the colonizing of Indigenous lands demonized Indigenous people who lived there before. The effects of the land acknowledgement are fourfold. 1, they show a commitment to human rights. 2, the educational. 3, it inspires others to support Indigenous communities. And 4, celebrates Indigenous communities. So we will be bringing this before council in October, but I wanted to give everyone a preview of what's in the pipeline, and we're all very excited about this. And also, personally, I want to thank the Human Rights Commission for bringing this to our attention. Ideas for things that make Amberley a better place and a better community come from the community to council. And the Human Rights Commission really embodies the spirit of being a group in the community that brings ideas up to council, that we don't sit in any magic chairs up here. We don't know everything. We don't know what goes on all over the place in the village or even anywhere else. So it is incumbent upon our citizens to come to us, and for that I'm really, really grateful to the Human Rights Commission for its work. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for the Vice Mayor? If not, we'll move on to the manager's report was submitted in your package. Are there any questions that I can refer to the manager? Okay, thank you. Chief, do you have anything? Okay. On the mayor's report, just a couple items. Again, we mentioned this at the last meeting. The ice cream social this year will be on August 29th. The staff are busy planning another fun day for the ice cream social. It will again be a drive-through ice cream social. The reason it's a drive-through is, again, they needed to make decisions early on. We didn't know what it would be like, and we still don't know for sure what it'll be like at the end of August. So I think this was a good decision on the behalf of, on staff's part. It will be from 1 to 4, and as I said, they are definitely planning a lot of fun activities. So please put that on your calendar and plan on attending. The next Environmental Stewardship Committee meeting will be July 26th. That again will be a meeting in person, and the Environmental Stewardship Committee will be going through its entire work plan for the next couple years at that meeting to really try to hone in on what we will be doing. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that Judge Nadel, who passed away last week, Judge Nadel served the community for definitely more than 40 years. And in fact, I think many members on this council were here when Judge Nadel swore us in. I think it was in 2013. He was a resident of the village, and that is in fact why the flag out front is flying at half-mast to recognize his service and his passing. So I just wanted to mention that, and that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any questions? Is there any new business? If not, we can consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.